Well, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, November 8th. This is Katie Giardello with the Michigan Center for Student Success, and I'm glad to see a few of you joining us this morning. I know a couple people had conflicts, but had intended to utilize the recording that we'll make available after today's program in order to spread this work out to their campus teams. So we'll look forward to engaging with those of you who are with us live this morning, and to those of you following along at the recording, hello to you all, and thanks for taking the time to review this webinar program. We have some special guests today from Jobs for the Future and Owensboro College in Kentucky, and they're going to be handling the bulk of the presentation, but as we have done in our previous sessions, I'm going to give a few background details and make sure that everybody is hearing me appropriately and knows how to use the webinar technology this morning. So I see that most of you who are logged in are engaged with us. That means that you're actively watching and not maybe reading whatever's happening in the news. But if you're able to hear me right now and to show me that you know how to engage with us, take a look at your control panel and look for the little hand raise button. And if you'll raise your hand so I know that you're hearing me fine. Hi, Diane. Hi, Scott. Thank you. All right. Hello, Amy. Hi, Carol. Okay, good. Thank you so much for doing that. You'll see that on that, I went ahead and unraised all your hands now so that I don't inappropriately come back to you for some kind of issue. You'll also see in that control panel that there are sections where you can input details in a chat forum or where you can input questions that you may have for myself or the other presenters. That's going to be my responsibility this morning to monitor those two boxes. I've let our presenters know that I will interrupt them if you ask a question or make a comment that's completely germane to the remarks at hand. But otherwise, we will probably save most of those discussion points to space at the end that we have reserved specifically for discussion. It does get a little tricky sometimes when we're trying to have discussion on a webinar and folks can't actually speak. I do have the capacity to unmute people, so if we get to that point at the end and people want to share freely through dialogue, I can do that. Otherwise, we can go ahead and chat using those two portals that I already pointed out to you. Okay, I think that's all for technical details. I will remind everyone that we're recording this morning, which I've already alluded to. And those of you who've been along for the ride for this project know that our project is fairly simple. There is an established process at the Medical Education and Training Campus for colleges and universities across the country to become degree bridge partners, which basically means that you'll commit to creating a degree completion plan for certain healthcare fields that match nicely from the military training to your academic programs. So our goal is to get more flags up here in the Michigan Mitten so that we have more opportunities for service members to pursue academic degrees in healthcare areas. You'll remember this slide too that shows you kind of the succession of our process, or our project, excuse me. We are almost done with the webinar series. We have one final webinar planned for December the 10th, where METC will go through step-by-step instructions for the materials that you'll need to be submitting to them by the February 1st deadline. I do want to remind folks about the MOU that is required to facilitate the stipend that you are eligible to receive, assuming you meet the deadline for submission on February 1st. There are a number of campuses that have still not returned that MOU. You'll recall in the introductory materials that we didn't give you a hard and fast deadline or date for that. We can understand and appreciate that some of your campuses needed to get started and see what the level of commitment was before you could honor that in a contract. But you will not be eligible to get that stipend until we have a fully executed MOU. And if you're not sure if your campus has submitted that, please feel free to follow up with me after the program today, and I can check in with you on that. At this point, I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Erica Oriens, who's the Executive Director of the Michigan Center for Student Success, to say hello and introduce our first speaker. Erica?
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. As Katie said, this is Erica Oriens with the Center for Student Success, and I am delighted to introduce Barbara Endel from Jobs for the Future. Some of you may know that the Center for Student Success is part of a network of student success centers across the country, of which there are 15 student success centers now, and Michigan was the second center created back in 2011. And our network of states is supported by Jobs for the Future, and we've had a strong relationship with JFF for many years, and are delighted that we could bring Barbara here today. She is what I consider to be an expert and a wonderful resource on career and technical education. She has been involved in community college success efforts through Achieving the Dream, developmental education initiatives, and accelerating opportunity. And I'm just delighted that she's able to join us today to share some of her experience in this area. So with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Terrific, Katie and Erica. Thank you so very much. And good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I just wanted to do a really terrific shout out to the Michigan Student Success Center. You've been such groundbreakers across many, many years. And I first became aware of your incredible work when Michigan was part of what was called our Breaking Through initiative. So Michigan and the colleges that are represented here today, and then the leadership, Katie, that you and Erica are bringing, really carry on this tradition of articulating credentials to credit, especially for underprepared adult learners. So I'm happy to set the context today. And so if we can move forward, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we are planning to do. And then Erica, thank you again for talking a little bit about JFF at Work. We, as you know, we do support the Student Success Center, but we also have many different initiatives that span our high school and early college work to community college redesign work at the institutional level to workforce. We have been around for 35 years, and we are truly at this nexus of education and workforce. We have over 150 staff members now in 3 locations, including our largest office in Boston and then one in Oakland and Washington, D.C. So for us, this is just so terrific. We want to both share what we know, and we're bringing a really terrific speaker here in a few minutes that you'll hear, Cindy Fiorella. And then for us, it's really awesome because we can share what we learn and help the field in practice and policy. So here's what we're going to do today. So I am going to take a few minutes and set the context around what are these key drivers driving and thinking through articulating these credentials to credit. Why is this important? And knowing that the deep work you're doing is just really, really incredibly important to both the students and the employers and your community. Then I'll introduce, and then we'll get Cindy sort of here where taking this idea about articulating credentials to credit in practice. I consider Owensboro one of the leaders across the country, and I know, Cindy, you're very deferent to your leadership role, but you've really been amazing to work with and have been inspiring to many other colleges outside of Kentucky, so thanks for joining us. And then last, we definitely we'll take questions along the way, but we'll also save some time at the end to really dig deep into areas that both you're challenged by and how we can maybe help you continue really the deep work that you're doing. So I hope it sounds like a really great way to spend the next 50 minutes or so with us.
Thank you, Barbara. And one thing I forgot to share at the beginning for our guests today is that our previous webinars have been very specifically focused on METC and the healthcare program articulation. Today's program takes a little bit more of a global, a bird's eye view, and we've done that intentionally because we want to help you understand how this work can be scaled beyond simply articulated pathways for veterans, which of course is important and we're highly committed to with this project. But the examples that will be discussed today might actually be, and they are outside of healthcare. I know this because I helped plan for this webinar. And so again, I just wanted to put that out there up front. I forgot to say that in my introductory remarks. And I think that'll be helpful to you all, as I said, in understanding how this work both can be more smooth in this project, but then can scale to other areas on the campus. So I will go back into the shadows here and move us forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Katie. So here are, again, these are things that are probably not new to so many of you, but I think bear a few minutes to kind of focus on and stay on this topic for a few minutes. So certainly we've all heard about, we've seen reports on a weekly basis on the future of work, and that we know that the changing nature of work will further heighten the challenges that colleges are facing. I'm a big fan of McKinsey Global Initiative. They just recently released a report at the beginning of the year called Skill Shift and the Future of the Workforce. And let me just give you a couple key statistics from their report to help ground why this is so important to articulate credit, both in healthcare and the work you're doing, and then finding and thinking about ways to spread this good work. So 23% of the current work activity hours, so more than half of the daily work activity hours, it's anticipated will be automated by 2030. so more than half. 32% of workers may actually be displaced to entirely new occupations, also by 2030. So a third of the workforce, 32%. And last, Accenture released a study where they surveyed over 1,200 chief executive officers from across some of the largest employers in our country. And a finding that was really critical, 74% plan to use artificial intelligence, so 74%, but only 3% report significant investments in training. So what the future of work defined by the automation, robotics, and AI say to me are largely these three things. Number one, we know shifts are going to happen with increased reliance on community colleges to address the skills gap, which makes having meaningful plans, strategies, policies, and practices that both accelerate and get the credit students both deserve and have earned and mapped in a way that's the most meaningful, even more important. Second point, people with the least amount of education and occupations that are likely to be most impacted by artificial intelligence and robotics are going to be disproportionately impacted with our underprepared adult learners. So education and credentials are still going to define and shape our future of work. So students who don't have that opportunity or don't get the credentials needed will be disproportionately impacted, further enhancing economic inequality. And last, this new emphasis on lifelong learning, which has everything to do with building these strong practices and policies to articulate and award credit and help move our skill sets faster to keep up with the speed of business. So those are my key takeaways from such really significant reports. And then second, you know, I'm just inspired by the work you're doing in Michigan to reimagine these traditional student pathways and making sure and really rethinking how we're able to embed credentials and further students' pathways in the best way possible. And then last, accelerating change. We know that we have to keep up with the speed of business. The labor market will continue to change. It's changing now. And again, what the work you're doing is just so important. Okay, Katie, would you mind? Great. So here's a really important point that I hope it doesn't escape us as we sort of think about these key themes across our webinar today. There is a time when innovation in higher education is like right now focusing on unbundling degrees, right, to make them shorter, faster, more modularized. The badging, the micro credentials, those sorts of things. They're finding ways to award credit, but this is a way of really rebundling degrees to take advantage of different type of credentials, and the embedding of the work you're doing is just really, really important. So again, I want to say hats off to Katie and Erica and the colleges. You're really at the forefront of making this meaningful and continuing to make alternative pathways important to students. I'd like to draw your attention to two critical initiatives in the field. One is sponsored by Lumina Foundation. They're located in Indianapolis, Indiana. They've largely been such a key driver across the country on making success a national movement, and I think they've largely succeeded. We know that credentials are a way to a viable income earner for students. So they've actually been working on a project called Connecting Credentials. There's over 150 colleges and organizations that are part of this effort. And these are organizations that have undertaken in a strong way some of the work the colleges you're doing, where they're embedding credentials within their degrees, and they're articulating credit in new and different ways. So I thought in a really quick way, I would talk about, there's these top 10 takeaways that they found from this study. So, you know, in a way that we can like kind of sprint through this, I want to draw your attention to the top 5 here. And then I'll talk just a little bit about the tremendous work that New America is doing on building better degrees, embedding industry certifications, and then we'll get to Cindy here in a moment. So drawing your attention to this, healthcare is just the start for you, which is such an important area, knowing it's the key driver in many communities and regions and across the state. But there's also diverse industry sectors that are doing this work where we can learn from. So as a follow-up, Erica and Katie and colleges that are here, I'll continue to help provide either research or support to let you know when you're ready to undertake other sectors and other areas and programs, how people are doing that and what they're doing. We're happy to share. The one thing I'm really glad about is like looking at industry certifications. It's all across the educational spectrum, early college, high school, and the work you're doing with community colleges and universities. We know employer demand is critical. And the great thing about number 4 is that the terms and the language, such as stackable and competency-based, is finally infiltrating more parts of the college and those discussions that you're having across with your colleagues. And the good thing is certificates are being embedded and awarded in different ways, which is why, Cindy, the work you're going to be talking about here shortly is fun to see how other states and other colleges are thinking about doing what you're going to be doing. All right, so then the next 5 is that, as you well know, what I call vendor-specific and vendor-neutral certifications are being embedded and awarded. So these are something like CompTIA and Microsoft that are very vendor-specific, are being embedded and awarded, while also vendor-neutral certifications are that way too, where they're not tied to a specific organization that's branded, but that the skills and competencies are being embedded. Certification exams are being paid for in multiple ways. This was one of the top challenges that has been cited in several studies, that while you might embed and think about articulating credit, if students in some ways can't pay for those certification exams, which is happening in a lot of ways, how can we make that happen? We know that cost and employer relevance are key drivers. That's really key. And then number 9, making sure that we're combining the academic and industry credentials and alignment with industry needs. This again is, I think, making that communication between the college and the employers and what is that mechanism, such an important question. And one of the things, Holly Zanville, who is one of the key authors of the Lumina report, that there's actually very little data or follow-up once students actually have their credit articulated or finish their program and then move into the next, what's next for them from a labor market perspective. There's very little that's being followed up. So there's another area for further inquiry. All right, very quickly, New America. They're a terrific policy and education organization based in DC. Mary Alice McCarthy is one of the best minds in this field. I often look to her when we want to really think about things. If you're looking for other spotlight organizations, Broward College in Florida is largely seen as also a national leader in this space. And they've really found ways with their college president and their leadership to make the work that you're doing and undertaking a college-wide priority. And they've put in mechanisms to make sure that happens. One of the other findings from national credentialing trends is that largely programs, while they're awarding credit for prior learning and establishing credit equivalencies, there's a lot of deviation around programs and their own policies. Faculty and deans are largely determining the timing and how that happens and how much credit you get, making the need for more systemic ways to think about this largely important. So again, this point around making the need to coordinate across colleges a really firm entity, and Cindy will talk about that. In terms of what other states are doing, places like Florida have been largely on the forefront as well, reimbursing the cost of the certification exam, knowing it's going to be embedded, knowing that that's generally a big student barrier. And last, in Louisiana, our colleagues there have passed system-wide policies around credit for prior learning and how to embed and articulate credit across certifications that are industry recognized. Again, is something that a system that wasn't very well coordinated, taking on these system-wide practices. All right, so Erica, I'm not sure if you were going to introduce Cindy or if you would like me to do that.
Have you introducing Cindy, Barbara, please?
Great. So I'd like to introduce Cindy Fiorella. She is the Vice President of Workforce Solutions at Owensboro Community and Technical College in Kentucky. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier today, even though Cindy is very humble, I think she's really been an outspoken voice around articulation of credit and the need to help students along their pathways and get to their degree program and get there in the fastest way possible. She's inventive. She can get things done on campus. She's a chief negotiator. So Cindy, I know the colleges are really eager to kind of hear the kind of work you're doing at Owensboro and the kind of strategies you've been employing there. So let me turn it over to you, and thank you, Cindy, for agreeing to be a guest with us today as well.
Good morning, everybody, and I apologize in advance for sounding like a frog. Delighted to be here. We too have a long-standing relationship with Jobs for the Future and actually have worked with many of our Michigan institutions over the years, everything from breaking through to skill up and scaling initiatives, Robert Wood Johnson initiatives, and have always been fortunate to learn more from our fellow practitioners than we've ever been able to share from our own practices. As you all have heard, I am a Vice President of Workforce Solutions. Chances are that your division, your comparable division, is your customized training and workforce development division within your respective institution. There are about 45 of us here, full-time practitioners in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is the fourth largest city in Kentucky, so we're a little bit of an anomaly. But we've made a very conscious decision to wrap into a college strategy where we take three populations of underskilled, providing opportunities for underskilled adults to get on educational pathways leading to credentials and degrees and better jobs, as well as building programs that serve the economic development priorities of our community, and then again direct services with business and industry. And it's worked very well for us, and we know how important responding to the employer demands are to those other two missions of serving those who are underskilled and wanting a leg up for their families, as well as ensuring the economic development stability of a community our size. What we talk so often about here is education, and I apologize also for the fact that what Barbara didn't say is that I'm more than perhaps a little opinionated. Passionate people I have found often are. We feel like that our educational system is solid and responsive to communities and to students, but that sometimes, and increasingly so, there needs to be a more responsive system put in place. And so our college often and community often turn to us to be research and development, to pilot something that then can be integrated. We often say education is, our college is like a battleship. It's built to serve the masses, but they're slow to turn. And we're a little bit more like a runabout. And so therefore we've got greater ability to maneuver and to put things on the ground to see, and actually throw rocks at our own work many times to see if we can make something work and then be adapted to larger scale. So what you see here is, again, our take on the situation currently at hand and what your all's work, I think, is focused on, which is people have gained competencies in the workplace. People have gained competencies through other training opportunities. Those competencies are valued highly in industry, but sometimes accreditation bodies will not allow full degrees or the types of degrees that are necessary for licensure for the kinds of jobs that employers are seeking to fill, or that individuals would like to get a leg up into. But individuals also don't want to go backwards. People who are passionate about what they've learned and what they've done in their life careers feel no need to go backwards to A when they feel like perhaps they are letter M. So what we're trying to do is move towards credentialing opportunities that are already in place, opportunities to take skills and competencies learned in the workplace or throughout an individual's life, to document those and so articulate them over to credit that gets those folks onto a pathway to post-secondary success that links up to their goals as for careers and degrees. What we have what our former system chancellor and a dear friend often said, and Barbara, you'll laugh at this one, Dr. Keith Bird often said, random acts of progress. We're going to talk just a little bit about a couple of programs where we adopt industry credentials and articulate those to academic degrees. And I think that they're probably the most similar examples I can give you to what you all have done in your work there with METC. The first is with our electrical union, IBEW, and an Associate of Electrical Technology degree, where we've had quite a few students earn their degree, and we have a very formalized program of accepting their credit, as well as an automotive technology collaborative with the nationally normed ASE certification exams. In the first one, the IBEW, what we had long-standing articulation agreements as a community and technical college system for an apprenticeship studies degree. And it was a type of thing that was always out there. Occasionally people talked about it. Occasionally we talked to the union about, you know, you all really should do this. We can accept your union training. And then your people can just come to us and take college courses, and eventually they'll get a degree. So that being said, I think in my 25 years here, I was aware of one individual in our college that was able to actually articulate that over. What we have entered into several years ago is a program where the union courses, the 5-year apprenticeship coursework, has been articulated, has been crosswalked by our division chair in advanced manufacturing to an electrical technology degree program. So when they finish their 5 years of apprenticeship studies, they have all of the technical requirements for that ET degree. In this particular case, that just because this is probably maybe of a little bit of interest to you, we also offer the general education courses at the same time the students are going through the apprenticeship programs at the Union Hall. So they'll have one night of the week that they're studying their technical courses as well as their OJT, meeting the OJT requirements that are built in. Those competencies are built into the electrical technology coursework. And then we offer the general education coursework in a contextualized manner so that it's more relevant to those students. And then at the end of the 5 years, they not only completed their apprenticeship studies program, they've also earned an electrical technology that's transferable to a 4-year degree.
Thanks, Cindy. Do you need a quick break for a beverage?
I'm going to take a sip if you're okay.
And I'm just going to check in with everybody as well and ask you to be thinking about questions that you may have for Cindy or Barbara. We will have time, like they both said at the end, where we can have a little bit more directed discussion. And hopefully you're seeing your processes that you're using with your campus team, sort of the way that they're playing out in this project in the things that Barbara is describing, or excuse me, Cindy is describing as they've done at her campus. And I know now she's going to move on to another example, but please be thinking about those questions and make sure that you take the opportunity when we have it at the end for that kind of back and forth with our presenters. Okay, hopefully that gave your voice a little break, Cindy.
Thank you, Katie. Most of you are familiar with automotive service excellence. And again, I think what you've done with your healthcare certifications, those are highly valued by industry. They're highly valued by our faculty who are subject matter experts. And they're certainly certifications that we want our students who come through the traditional door of our colleges to earn as they progress through their academic career with us. In the case of ASE, those students were getting that in a parallel format, but we weren't recognizing students who were on the outside and encouraging them to come in. We weren't articulating that credit, and now we've, in the case of ASE, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, you cannot take an ASE exam unless you meet a certain required years of field experience. Generally, it's 2 years throughout all of their certifications. So you come and take a high-stakes test, but you have to have demonstrated at the time of registration for that test, that high-stakes test, your years of experience. So we have now aligned articulating stackable college coursework as well as certificates and diplomas all the way. We've aligned them with all of the ASE certifications. And then for those individuals who are seeking, who have earned master's certification, we count that and articulate those credits to all of the automotive technical requirements. So an individual would only have to have the general education coursework to earn the automotive tech 2-year degree. And again, that's a transferable degree. One of the things that when we talked to Katie and Erica was that we consider ourselves old practitioners, on the ground problem solvers. And I think that's why we often get handed things, because again, traditional education its performance is solid. It's everybody knows what to do. Everyone knows their roles. Everybody's very comfortable that they're serving students well. But sometimes the change aspects are harder for them or take longer for them to focus in on. So one of the things that I offered as part of what I could share this morning was the speed bumps are going to come up in the oddest places, and you all may or may not have experienced them. And even whenever we think that everything is all worked out and everybody has agreed upon, suddenly someone from a far corner of the institution can bring something to a screeching halt. Not in any way to be a naysayer or to denigrate the work at hand, but it doesn't fit in their workaday world box. Sometimes it can just be the PeopleSoft system, our student management system will not allow for some of the things that may come into play. And somebody will say, well, you can't do that. You know, you can't do this during this time period. You can't do this. There's no way of putting this information into that required box. So a few of the things that we wanted to talk about was, I'm sure you all have already done this, but having the college leadership from the president to the entire executive team, and I mean more than just that the president has signed off on the application letter, is critical. It means that you probably, the team leader or members of the team, probably need, as an informational point of view, to go to that executive team and discuss the work at hand and the committee's priorities and what you're planning to do. And so some of the questions you may hear may come up then even from executive team members. We love our business officer, my counterpart, but she often is the one that goes, you can't do that. You're giving away our money. So hold on just a moment, please. I think demonstrating the institutional payoffs to those executive team members first and foremost, that you're building new students for the college, that you're not giving away college credits. Articulation is much more palatable in Kentucky than waivers. College waivers have a real genuine cost. We're not an FTE funded state. We're a benchmark state in our funding. So it's very important that everybody understands that those are students who would not have come to us necessarily in the first place if we don't articulate those credentials, and that they're going to be new students for us in their further coursework beyond that credential that they're articulating into the institution. I think you're going to hear the old competency-based versus credit conversations. I think universally everybody knows that, yes, our accreditation bodies are completely on board and encourage competency-based, but in practice, they're built on credit hours, and usually we see this challenge whenever we start working with our subject matter experts, our faculty down in the program areas. Your division lead or your department head, or however you all function in that administrative role, will be on board, but then you'll get down to a faculty member that goes, well, I don't care that credential somewhat aligns. They'll say that somewhat aligns to the competencies, but they haven't done my papers, they haven't done my tests, and I don't know that they're ready to go on to further coursework. That one is a huge one. No matter how many initiatives we've done, we run across that all the time, and it takes quite a bit of a negotiation to get them to accept and provide a leg up for students who are coming at them, what I term sideways versus through their program. I don't think they're being ill-intended. I think they just know that what they do equates to success in the long run, and they want to make sure that students are prepared, and it's hard to convince them many times that a student is prepared if we accept their competencies and their certifications. Again, the accreditation body is just simply what I said, is that you're going to have to make certain that if there are residency requirements from your accreditation body, for instance, that 25% rule, you may bump into of where studies have to take place at the home institution. You may have some of those types of initiatives. So again, more than anything else is just be aware of it, tuck it away. You may not run into it, but if you do, you'll at least say, oh yeah, somebody's mentioned that, and there are workarounds for this. I think it's very important to identify the stakeholders and the champions. It sounds like your teams are designed that way. Members of the registrar, subject matter experts within the divisions, student affairs, because people there in your START centers or your open enrollment centers are going to have to know about the program so that students feel welcome and that everybody's on board with the processes and students don't get bounced all over the institution. I think it helps to find a faculty friend who's passionate about this. And it also is, we found, is extremely important to have some industry partners buy in. If we can have an industry partner speak to our committees or our divisions about how important this is and how excited they are, that usually goes a long way towards getting people to work outside of their tried and true methodologies. Communicate is just simply, I'm speaking to the choir here, you all know this, as much as possible that you can send out brief updates on the work, because invariably it seems like we've communicated, but people will say at the end, well, nobody told me that. Well, I didn't know this. Well, you can't do that. So rather than get to the end and have people try to unbundle what's been determined, you know, just put that in the back of your mind. And if you can have stakeholder meetings, just little brief updates at whether it's a division meeting or update the executive team periodically, that seems to have helped us. Ultimately, it will have responsibilities. Someone needs to be the torchbearer on this once you've gotten everything bundled up. Because oftentimes we think we've gotten to the end of a process. The articulation agreements are in place. Everybody knows that the students will get this amount of credit, but nobody remembers. And if there's a player change, then that student is suddenly going, yes, but I found out on this website that you all take this. And nobody in the student affairs office or the registrar's office knows what's going on. So if someone can own this, if a division is charged with this, and everybody knows who that point person or persons are, so much the better. If all else fails, and sometimes it can be, you can skin your knees getting people to agree to something that you thought you had agreed on institutionally. It may require the vice president of that division or even the president to have a loving kumbaya kind of meeting. We have often skated by on the fact that this is a special initiative, a statewide priority. The president will always back us up on that and remind folks that this is an institutional charge and commitment. And just know that sometimes you just have to have a gentle reminder of this is not an optional thing. This is a must-do thing. And then again, as you go forward, the sustainability factors goes back to whose job is this? How is it that going forward that you all feel like you can ensure that students coming to you with these certifications can grow into other healthcare programs within your institution and can fully take advantage of those opportunities and won't be met with, well, yeah, I know it says we do this on the website, but you know, that was something we did 3 years ago, and there's nobody here that does that anymore.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy. I think I wrote down a couple of nuggets from both you and Barbara's remarks. What you just described about kind of identifying roles and responsibilities is something that comes up often in this work that deals with veterans. A lot of campuses like to push off all veterans related anything to whoever it is that handles veterans work. And usually, particularly at small campuses, that's someone who does the VA benefit processing, who perhaps is important to, but not the only person that is integral to creating academic pathways for veterans. So I like to call it the who's on first conversation. But I like what you said better, just kind of identifying whose responsibility certain aspects of this work are. I think this is the point in the presentation where we wanted to pause for some discussion, but before we take any discussion from our participants, is there anything further, Barbara or Cindy, either of you want to say? I have a couple of questions that I thought I'd ask the participants here since I'm not seeing their questions coming in yet, but I thought I'd give you a chance if there's anything further you wanted to share here.
So this is Barbara. I think I'm good. I would love to dive in and see if folks have questions or kind of focus on topics.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool. Well, I'm going to allow my colleagues in Michigan to take some time to type out some questions that you may have for Cindy or Barbara. And if you don't, because I think what they described is pretty intuitive and probably makes a lot of sense to the work that you've all been doing already with this project and perhaps other projects on your campuses that have been relative to credential articulation. So I have a couple of questions for you all as well, because we are, as I said at the beginning of the program, we are done at this point with our technical assistance webinars until the one on December 10th that will have METC describing what it is they're looking for submissions at the final end of the project. So I wanted to check in and ask my Michigan colleagues to put some things in the chat box and either type it up directly in the chat box or ask me to unmute you if you'd like to share verbally. How is this going for you? Are you making progress that you expected? Have you fallen into some of the same, I guess, pitfalls that, or speed bumps, as Cindy called them, that she described in the previous slide with this work? Has there been something that's arisen that's been unexpected? Or I've heard from some of you that some of this has actually gone much more smoothly than you thought it would, which I think is a good thing. And I heard Cindy also describe in several of the scenarios that she put forward that, and I think this is happening on some of our campuses with this project too, that it ends up in some areas being simply a general education package. When the service member in our project, we can use that term since we're talking specifically about veterans, when the service member has completed the actual credential that goes along with your program area, oftentimes all that is left for the college or university is the general education coursework in order to complete the degree requirements, and perhaps there's a residency requirement as well. But I think that some of you are recognizing that actually becomes a little bit easier sometimes than having to modularize the actual healthcare curriculum and try to parse out which objectives had been met and which hadn't. So those are the kinds of things that I've been hearing from our teams. If anyone wants to take the opportunity now to share a little progress update or anything that's been frustrating where you might be able to find some support from your colleagues around the state, please feel free to do that. Also feel free to put your questions in for Barbara or Cindy. And this, I always like to say when we do webinars, this is the dance where you just kind of keep talking and wait for somebody to engage with you. But silence can be golden, so I can give you all a minute as well to kind of go ahead. And also, I'm very curious, as kind of the liaison or the coordinator of the project, what kind of support do you all need to keep going, to make sure that you hit the target for the February 1st deadline? And if you don't want to share that publicly, you can certainly follow up with me after today's webinar. Okay, we're a little sluggish today. I'm not getting any responses from folks out there. Let's move to the next slide here, and I think this is the last one, so we can make closing comments, and I'll keep an eye out if anyone is still typing something up for some feedback for us.
Great. So Katie, this is Barbara. So this is a slide that I thought would just be terrific to maybe inspire and have us sort of, go forth and conquer as the project that you're working on continues to evolve and campuses continue to work on this. And I think Cindy alluded to it a little bit earlier around, we kind of do workarounds, but I think really the work you're leading in Michigan and that METC is around the country is like so important to ensure our educational quality and trying to make this more mainstream, not just the work of the Veterans Office, et cetera. So that is just a really, really, I hope, good point to make, that we're so many organizations recognize and understand the work you're doing in Michigan, and we'll look for ways to continue to spread that. To us, the access is so important to make sure students are being able to get the credit they deserve and accelerate their learning and their acquisition of credit to make sure that they're kind of getting where they need to go. It, of course, all this better aligns to industry, et cetera. To me, I feel like the work you're doing in Michigan and across the country with these other sites it's multiplying the benefits of this increased attainment that only helps, that helps everyone. And for me, I care a lot about social and equity, and so does JFF. And I know all of you all of you engaged in this work. And obviously, making sure that we've got these market valued credentials. So those are sort of my lasting points, just to say, like, rock on, you guys in Michigan. We're behind you. We can do. We're willing to do anything we can to help support your work. So hopefully we added a little value today and got groups across the state thinking. So with that, Katie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Cindy or Erica, are there any parting words you want to share before we close down for the morning?
No, other than the fact that this is really exciting and I think a big move for all of us across the nation. So we're delighted to see the work as you progress. I think it's particularly exciting because it's in healthcare. And I know that Robert Wood Johnson, we're project many years ago where we took incumbent workers and got them into an accelerated nursing program. It's one of the most exciting things that I ever did professionally. That being said, I still have the scars to prove it. So I'm delighted and wish you Godspeed. And if there's ever anything we can do to help, please know that you've got a world of workforce practitioners behind you. So keep us posted.
Thank you. I have been so, one of the best kind of unanticipated benefits to this has been just the really positive kind of go get 'em, we can do this attitude that people exhibit. Everyone seems to know that this is the right thing to do for everyone, but certainly for service members, for the sacrifices that they've made for all of the freedom that we enjoy. So it's just been a really positive project to be working on. We do have a couple of questions that are coming in, so I'll pose those to the group real quick. One of them seems to be more for our participants, asking how institutions are proposing to their institution what they will be spending their stipends on. So I can tell you what I've heard from a few people, and then you all have the list of project leads, and I would encourage you to socialize this question amongst that list. And if you don't have it, I'd be happy to put you in touch with folks from the other colleges. One of the big things I've heard from folks is that they are subsidizing the travel to the METC campus. Now, again, we didn't require the travel or the trip to take the tour to METC in this project, but I think the majority of the campuses are doing the trip. Either one person or a team of people are taking that trip, which will pretty quickly take the stipend up since it's not a very large amount. And we know it doesn't cover all the costs of the people working on the work, and that it's really more of a symbolic monetary amount. But anytime we have capacity to forward resources onto your campuses to offset the costs of the work that we all know is in the best interest of both your students and the state at large, we want to do that. So I've heard that has been the biggest piece is offsetting the travel or reimbursing for the travel. Other folks are using it to pay for convenings of your campus team. So for some of you that has meant providing food for your campus team at particular meetings that warrant it if they're longer in nature. Some people are using it to offset staff time. I'm not sure whether or not they've been successful offsetting faculty time as well, because there are often different regulations for how that works, but I've heard that people are spending their stipends that way as well. Some people are reserving some of the monies for some marketing and outreach costs after these programs are built. So that's another thing that I've heard as well. Anyone else who'd like to comment on that, please feel free to put it into the chat box, or you can even let me know and I'm happy to forward that on to the person who asked the question. But hopefully that helps. And then we got to thank you. I'm glad to know that Keith Hall, who is from the METC campus, was on today's webinar. So Keith, hopefully you agree that this provides a nice sort of wraparound framework for what you guys are doing. I think a lot of what you're doing at METC to promote the best interests of the service member beyond their service commitment. And I hope that other units or other folks involved with educating our service members will consider the model that you've taken, because I think it's just a win-win-win. It's good all around. It's good for all of us, both at the individual service member and student level, but also at the institutional level when we think about larger social institutional interaction. So I'm glad that Keith was able to be on the call. And I know he's always available and very responsive when you guys have questions about what METC needs from you to keep moving the work forward, which again is our next step. We have the webinar with METC. It will be brief, and they have provided some materials that I forwarded on to you all as well that explains what they're looking for in the submission of your Degree Bridge materials. And again, you know the deadline is February 1st, which is the deadline tied to our funding. So if there are questions or things that you need support from me on, please feel free to be in touch with me directly. If you'd like to reach out to some of your peer institutions, I can certainly socialize that list again so that you guys can talk with one another. But we're here to support you. We want to make sure you're successful and that money ends up in your coffers at the end of the project. So please also be thinking about those MOUs, because again, I've only gotten 2 of them, I think, fully executed. Anything final before we close down for the morning? All right. Well, I love to give people the gift of time. So I'll give you 5 minutes back in your Thursday morning, and I'll thank everyone again for your engagement, both our presenters and our participants from Michigan today, and for Mr. Hall for joining us too. I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll talk with you again soon, I'm sure.